My name's Noah. I'm 32, and I've always felt like the odd one out in my family. Not in a charming, quirky sitcom way, but more like a puzzle piece that just doesn't fit the box. As far back as I can remember, I was an afterthought, the middle child between my older sister Jenna, who was the golden child, and my younger brother, Tyler, the baby everyone felt they had to protect, even from his own bad choices. Meanwhile, I was just there, quiet, responsible, never really needing anything. Because I never demanded attention, I got exactly none. Growing up, holidays at my grandma's old house were the only times I felt anything close to normal. Her place was this creaky two-story on a quiet street lined with maple trees that turned brilliant gold every fall. She had a big front porch, where she'd sit in her old wicker chair, humming Sinatra and calling me her favorite listener. She never said it directly, but I think she saw what my parents didn't, that I was trying. I noticed things, like when Mom would roll her eyes behind my back when I talked about school, or how Dad only seemed to ask Tyler about sports, and Jenna about her grades while I just got a generic house life. My grandma Lorraine was the only person who truly made me feel seen. She taught me how to garden, how to balance a checkbook, how to cook the perfect pot roast. Always saved the last scoop of mashed potatoes for me, even when Jenna was complaining about not getting enough. When Grandma died, I was 21 and away at college, unable to afford the flight home. My parents didn't offer to help. Didn't even tell me the funeral was moved up until the morning of. By the time I got the voicemail, she'd already been buried. They said it was a small family gathering, that everyone was grieving, and it wasn't about you. But it felt like it always did, like I was just a footnote in my own story. Years passed, and I built a life that didn't need them. I moved out west, got a decent job in software development, and slowly climbed the ladder. I kept my distance. Not out of anger, but in that quiet, self-preserving way you learn when you're tired of fighting for love. I'd still get the occasional group text, the happy birthday, Noah message 6 hours late, or an invite to a family reunion only after Jenna realized she couldn't book the Airbnb without my share of the payment.
Ow.
I rarely went, and when I did, I stayed quiet, smiled through the passive-aggressive comments, and left early. But there was one thread still connecting me to them. Grandma's house. After she passed, my parents took over the property. They told us, me, Jenna, and Tyler, that Grandma had left it to them for simplicity's sake. I didn't push. I didn't ask to see the will at the time. Just assumed they were telling the truth. Besides, what did I know about inheritance law? I was a broke college student juggling student loans and part-time gigs. The house sat empty for years, except for occasional visits when Tyler needed a quiet place to clear his head, or when Jenna wanted some me time away from the city. I visited it once, maybe 2 years after the funeral. It still smelled like her lavender and cinnamon. Her rocking chair was still there, her old piano untouched. But something felt different, hollow, like the house itself knew it was just waiting to be gutted. I asked my parents what the plan was. They said it was complicated, that they were considering options, that there were tax implications. I nodded, let it go. Not a part of me. Maybe the part Grandma nurtured never truly did. Then last year I caught wind that the house was being prepped for sale. Not from my parents, of course. I found out from a high school friend back home who drove past it and texted me. Hey, saw a for sale sign on your grandma's old place? That sucks. Thought you guys were keeping it. That text hit me like a punch. I wasn't ready. I called my mom that night. She picked up like nothing was happening. Oh, hi, honey. Everything okay? You're selling Grandma's house? There was a pause, just long enough to feel deliberate. Well, yes. We were meaning to tell you. It's just you're so busy out there in California, and we didn't think you'd be interested. Interested? I repeated. It's Grandma's house. Yes. And we've kept it up for years, Noah. It's become a financial burden. The market's good right now. I didn't argue. I didn't scream or beg. I just went quiet and said, okay, thanks for letting me know. The call ended awkwardly, and I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at my ceiling fan spinning lazily above me. Something inside me shifted that night. It's not anger exactly, but clarity. A realization that I'd spent too long letting this family decide what I did and didn't deserve. Maybe it was time I took the wheel. The next week, I started making calls. Quiet ones. I called the realtor listed on the sign, introducing myself with a different last name, my middle name, Bennett. I asked for a tour, pretending I was a remote investor. I got on a plane, showed up in a blazer, and walked through my grandma's house like a stranger. My heart cracked in places I didn't know still existed. The garden was overgrown, the wallpaper peeling, but the bones were still there. Her spirit lingered in the corners. When the realtor asked if I was serious about putting in an offer, I smiled and said, very. I didn't overbid. I didn't use emotion. I used a shell. Company I'd quietly started 6 months earlier for another real estate project. The paperwork was clean. The sale went through fast. And just like that, I owned the house. But I didn't say a word. Not yet, because Christmas was coming. And like clockwork, Jenna sent out the group text in early December, Christmas dinner. At Mom and Dad's, 7 p.m. formal attire this year. It's big news to share. RSVP. I booked the flight. I showed up at their doorstep in a charcoal suit, bottle of wine in hand. Tyler opened the door, already tipsy, and greeted me with a well. Well, if it isn't the ghost of Christmas past. Inside, the decorations were over the top as usual. Garlands, blinking lights, those mechanical reindeer that whirred and clacked when they moved. Jenna was already there in a gold sequin dress, sipping champagne and scrolling on her phone. Parents were in their element. Mom buzzing around the kitchen, Dad holding court in the living room like a man 10 years younger. Dinner started normally enough. Ham, green beans, mashed potatoes. Jenna going on about her new job title. Tyler cracking crude jokes about crypto. I stayed quiet, polite, smiling when expected. And somewhere between the second glass of wine and dessert, Mom looked up from her plate and said almost gleefully, "Oh, we finally sold Grandma's house." Just last week, the buyers were eager. Thank God. Jenna laughed, twirling her fork. About time. That place was such a waste of space. And Noah, well, he was never in the will anyway. I set my glass down slowly, letting the moment stretch. Tyler chuckled. Good, he'd probably have turned it into a tech bunker or some weird startup compound. I looked around the table at the people who always assumed I'd stay quiet, who thought I'd just let it go. I picked up my wine again, took a sip, and said, "Cool. Hope you enjoy the cash, since I'm the one who bought it." The table went silent. Mom's face froze mid-smile. Jenna blinked, confused. Tyler furrowed his brow like he was trying to solve a math problem. And I just sat there, calm as ever, watching the curtain finally lift. For a moment, no one said a word. The hum of the heater and the soft clinking of Jenna's fork slipping off her plate were the only sounds in the room. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I wanted it to hang in the air, thick, uncomfortable, undeniable. The kind of silence that makes people shift in their seats and reevaluate everything they thought they knew. Finally, Jenna let out a breathy laugh, like I'd told some elaborate joke she didn't quite get. "Wait, what do you mean you bought it?" I said, setting my glass down gently. "I'm the one who bought Grandma's house through a company I own, Dad." Spoke next. "Noah, don't be ridiculous. The buyers were from out of state, some real estate group or something." "Holdings," I said. "That's me." Mom blinked. "That's not you? It's not your name? Bennett's my middle name?" "I used it for the LLC. It's legal, clean, quiet." Jenna's face was turning red now, not from embarrassment, but something closer to fury. "Why would you do that behind our backs?" That word, our, rang in my ears, like I was trespassing on something sacred. Even though I'd grown up knowing I was never really in with them, I shrugged. It was for sale. I made an offer. It was accepted. Nothing behind anyone's back. "But we would have gotten so much more if we knew it was you," Mom blurted. It told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't about legacy. It wasn't about Grandma. It was about the money. Of course it was. Dad leaned forward now, arms crossed. "So what, you just bought it to be petty? You planning to rub it in our faces?" "No," I said evenly. "I bought it because it meant something to me, and because none of you seemed to care what happened to it." Tyler chuckled under his breath. "So let me get this straight. You overpaid for that old dump just to feel something?" "Funny," I replied, not bothering to look at him. I actually got it below asking, "Your realtor wasn't great at vetting offers." The tension at the table was thick enough to slice with a butter knife. But instead of backing off or trying to make peace like I used to, I just sat in it. Let them stew. Let them realize for once they weren't in control of the narrative. The rest of dinner was tight-lipped. Jenna went quiet, stabbing at her food with too much force. Tyler kept checking his phone like he was trying to escape through the screen. Mom excused herself to check on dessert, but didn't return for 15 minutes. Dad just kept sipping his scotch, jaw clenched, eyes distant. Afterward, I helped clear the table, mostly for something to do. As I reached for Jenna's plate, she grabbed my wrist. "Why didn't you tell us?" she hissed. "You think this makes you better than us or something?" I paused, looking her dead in the eye. "No, I think it means I stopped waiting for permission to do what felt right." She dropped my wrist, like it burned her. "You're unbelievable." "You're welcome to come by sometime," I added. "Maybe I'll show you the garden." "I'm thinking of planting sunflowers," she stormed off. After dessert, store-bought tiramisu that Mom pretended was homemade, I made my excuses, said I had an early flight, thanked them for dinner. Hugs were avoided, except a half-hearted one from Dad, stiff as a plank. But as I turned to leave, Mom followed me to the door. "You blindsided us," she said, her voice low but sharp. "This family has always made decisions together, you know that?" I stopped, hand on the doorknob. "You mean you and Dad make the decisions?" Jenna cheers. Tyler coasts. "I'm just supposed to go along with it." "That's not fair." "No," I said, turning to face her.
Ice.
"What's not fair is you telling me I wasn't in Grandma's will."
Ice.
That was something to laugh about, like I didn't matter to her. She flinched just slightly, but it was there. I opened the door. "I'll see you around." I walked out into the cold, the night air biting but clean, freeing. Back at my hotel, I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. I expected to feel triumphant, but instead I felt unsettled, like I'd pulled back the curtain and finally seen them for who they really were. And part of me hated that I wasn't even surprised. But the next morning, that's when the fallout started. Tyler was the first to text me. "Bro, Mom's losing it. She thinks you manipulated them." Then came Jenna. "Real classy, Noah. Can't believe you'd lie just to spite us." And finally, Mom. Hers was more passive-aggressive. "We're disappointed, but not surprised. Your actions have consequences. Don't expect us to support you if things go south." I stared at that one the longest. Support, I'd never asked them for anything. Not when I couldn't afford the funeral. Not when I struggled to pay rent. Not when I got my first promotion, and no one even replied to the group text I sent. They'd done nothing but withhold. And now they acted like I'd betrayed them. Over the next few weeks, it escalated. First, they started dropping little bombs in the extended family group chats. Subtle jabs. "So grateful Jenna helped us through all the estate stuff. Some people just care about the money. Can't believe how people twist things to make themselves look like heroes." Then came the calls from my aunt and uncle, from cousins I barely spoke to. Most were polite but probing. "Noah, I heard you bought the house. Why didn't you say anything sooner?" "I thought it was a family decision." "Aren't your parents upset I didn't feed the fire?" I just said, "It's complicated," and let them draw their own conclusions. But behind the scenes, I started preparing for something more. I wasn't done. Not yet. Because while they were busy trying to rewrite the story, I was quietly digging into the one thing they never expected me to look at, Grandma's actual will. And what I found changed everything. The will was never supposed to be complicated. At least, that's what Mom always claimed. Every time the house came up in conversation over the years, rare as those times were, she'd casually throw in, "It was left to us, simple and clean." Grandma didn't want to cause drama. And because I'd grown so used to being excluded, I believed it. Or maybe I just didn't have the energy to question it back then. But after that Christmas dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling. Something didn't sit right. The way Mom smirked when she told me I was never in the will. The way Jenna laughed like it was a punchline. The speed at which they sold the house once I started asking questions. So one quiet evening, curled up on my worn couch with a laptop and a stiff drink, I started digging. I didn't expect to find much, but curiosity is a strange thing. It pulls you forward, even when you're not sure what you're looking for. I started with public records, the sale deed from Grandma to my parents. Nothing surprising there except the date. The property had been transferred 3 weeks after Grandma's funeral, not as part of her will, but through a quitclaim deed. That raised my first red flag. Why would they use a quitclaim deed instead of letting it go through probate? And why would Grandma do that when I knew for a fact she had a will? So I called the county records office the next day, asked about the will. The woman on the phone was helpful, a little bored sounding, but she pointed me to the probate filings. From the year Grandma died, and there it was, plain as day. Lorraine Davis, deceased. Will filed. I requested a copy. It arrived by mail 5 days later. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, sitting alone at my kitchen table. My eyes scanned the page, my heart thudding as I read the opening lines. I, Lorraine Davis, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Her voice rang in my head as I read. I could almost picture her writing it, sitting at that old oak desk in her study, the one with the tiny brass lamp that glowed like candlelight. Then I reached the section that shattered me, to my beloved grandson. Noah James Davis, I leave my home and all its contents, as he has always valued the history and heart of our family. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it. Not Mom, not Dad, not Jenna or Tyler. Me. She had left the house to me, and somehow I'd never been told. Never seen this, never even heard a whisper of it. The rest of the will distributed other things. Jewelry to Jenna. My grandpa's old watch to Tyler. Some savings to a local animal shelter. But the house. That wasn't some oversight. That wasn't a simple transfer. It was deliberate, specific. And they'd lied, not just omitted. Lied. They told me I was never in the will. They'd mocked me at dinner, made me feel like a fool, all while knowing they had stolen something meant for me. I felt something rupture inside me. Not anger, not sadness, something deeper, a kind of betrayal that coils in your gut and hollows you out from the inside. For a long time I sat there unmoving. The paper lay in front of me, real and solid and damning. My hands trembled, my teeth clenched. She trusted me, and they took it anyway. The more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. Why they rushed the sale. Why they never showed me the paperwork. My mom always said the house was too much responsibility for you. They didn't just assume I didn't care. They assumed I'd never look, that I'd stay quiet like I always had, that I'd shrug and disappear into the background. But not this time. The next day, I contacted a lawyer. I laid everything out. What I'd found, how the house had been transferred, the will, the dates. He was calm but visibly intrigued. Let me guess, he said, flipping through the pages. Your parents never submitted this version to probate. Looks like it, I said, my voice tight. He nodded slowly. There might have been an older version that left everything to your mother. They could have filed that one instead. But this version here, it's newer, dated a month before your grandmother passed, and that makes it legally binding. If we can prove this was her last will, and that the quitclaim deed was executed under false pretenses, then yes, you have a case. A case. That word echoed in my head. I wasn't sure I even wanted the legal battle. It wasn't about clawing back every cent. It was about what it represented. About how easily they'd erase me from the narrative, from my own inheritance. How comfortably they'd sat around a holiday table, smug and secure, laughing at the idea that I might matter. I didn't respond to the group texts after that. I didn't return Jenna's passive-aggressive calls. Tyler tried to play peacemaker, sending messages like, "You guys just need to talk this out," or "Mom's stressed." Don't make it. Worse, I ignored them all. Instead, I went back to the house. My house. It was early spring. The yard was still thawing from winter. The paint was chipping. The porch creaked. But it was mine. And as I stepped onto the property, I felt something shift. A calm resolve settled over me, as sure as gravity. I unlocked the door, walked through the hallway, and found myself in the study. The same desk where Grandma probably wrote that will. Her lamp still there, dusty but intact. I sat, opened my laptop, and started writing a letter. Not to my family, but to the estate attorney's office, because there were more things I needed to know. If they forged paperwork once, who's to say it was only the house? The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It trickles in a little more each day, like a leak in the ceiling, silent, steady, rotting everything beneath the surface before you even realize what's been damaged. That's what the weeks after discovering the will felt like. Quiet rot. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends. Not the woman I'd been casually seeing. Not the guy at work who once called me his emergency contact after a bad bike accident. I didn't know how to talk about it.
Ow.
How do you explain that your family stole your inheritance? Lied to your face, then mocked you for not being included in something that was yours all along? I didn't cry. I couldn't, not at first. But something in me started to pull away from everything. Like my emotional reflexes had shut down to protect what little trust I had left in the world. I went to work, answered emails, showed up to meetings, but I wasn't really there. I skipped lunch with coworkers, let calls go to voicemail. I walked through each day with a numb kind of precision, like a shadow of myself. And then came the call. It was my mom again. I don't know why I answered. Maybe I was curious to hear what lie they'd try next. Her voice was soft, performative. Hi, sweetheart. Didn't answer. We've been thinking a lot about. That night, Christmas, things got a little out of hand. Still silent, she sighed, deep and rehearsed. We didn't know how much that house meant to you. You never said anything. I nearly laughed. I never said anything. What was I supposed to do? Write a heartfelt letter to be considered for the bare minimum of fairness. She kept going. We understand you're upset, but you have to see this from our side. We were trying to make things simpler, less messy. You've always had your own life out there. And well, your sister and Tyler have had a rough few years. There it was, the justification. Jenna's failed engagement and mountain of debt. Tyler's inability to hold down a job. Somehow my problems were relevant. Meanwhile, I'd quietly built something stable, functional, and that made me less deserving. I found Grandma's will, I said coldly. Silence. Then what? The most recent version. The one that names me as the sole heir to the house. Another pause, slight hitch in her breath. That can't be right. There was an earlier one. There was, I interrupted. But this one's dated a month before she passed, which makes it the valid one. You didn't probate it. You filed the old one, transferred the house. By quitclaim, and hoped I'd never check. Her tone sharpened. That's a serious accusation, Noah. No, I said, my voice finally rising. What you did was serious. I'm just tired of pretending it didn't happen. She went. Quiet again, and then she hung up. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. That silence became the defining noise of the next month. I expected a storm, more angry texts, maybe even a legal response. But instead, they went completely dark, as if they were scrambling behind the scenes, figuring out how to spin this. Meanwhile, I started to spiral. I'd like to say I rose above it, that I held my head high and kept moving forward, but I didn't, not right away. I stopped showing up at work for a few days, claiming food poisoning. I drank too much, ate too little, wandered around the house late at night with a flashlight, trying to feel close to Grandma again, trying to feel anything again. I found her old journals in a dusty box beneath the staircase. Just sat there on the wooden floor, flipping through them. Her handwriting, loopy, elegant, patient, calmed something in me. In one entry, dated just a week before she died, she'd written, I've finalized the new will. It's what feels right. I love all my grandchildren, but only one of them ever sat with me without needing anything. Noah will care for this home. I know he will. That was the moment I broke. Not in anger, but in grief. I wept quietly in that old, hollow house. For her, for the child I used to be, for the version of me that still clung to hope that this family, my family, might one day see me. I stayed the night on the old couch. No heat, just a blanket and the smell of aged wood and memory. But for the first time in weeks, I slept deep, uninterrupted sleep. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them yet. I wasn't going to launch a public family war, not while they were still pretending nothing had happened. That's what they expected: drama, noise, me swinging wildly out of desperation. No, I was going to plan quietly, strategically. I started meeting with my lawyer more regularly, building a timeline, collecting every text, every voicemail, every signed document. We mapped out their entire shell game, from the probate filing to the deed transfer to the recent sale attempt. And then we filed for a full investigation into the mishandling of the estate. But I told no one, not even when Jenna reached out with her fake olive branch a week later. "Hey, just thinking about you. Hope you're okay. Let's talk." Left it on red. Not because I didn't want to respond, but because for once, the silence belonged to me. In the meantime, I returned to work, cleaned up my apartment, started cooking again. Little steps. I wasn't okay. Not fully. But I was moving again, and that mattered. Back at the house one weekend, I noticed something new. A car parked down the street. Same one, 3 days in a row. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor's guest. But on the fourth day, I recognized the driver. Dad. He didn't approach. Didn't get out, just sat there watching. He thought I didn't notice, but I did. And I realized something important in that moment. They weren't scared of losing money. They were scared of losing control, which meant for the first time in my life, I had leverage, and I wasn't done using it. For most of my life, my family's attention, or lack of it, dictated how I moved through the world. I was shaped by their indifference, their favoritism, their constant need to remind me that I was the quiet one, the forgettable one, the one who always had enough and didn't need help. It wasn't until they took something sacred from me, Grandma's house, that I finally understood what I had let them get away with. But once I saw it clearly, there was no going back. I'd hit bottom, sure. But something about rock bottom gives you a perfect view of everything above you, and I was ready to climb. The first step was reclaiming space, not just the physical house, but the mental room they'd taken up in my life. I deleted the family group chat, blocked Jenna and Tyler on social media, and quietly set new boundaries with extended relatives. My Aunt Carol messaged me a half-hearted, "Hope you're doing okay?" "Your mom's very upset." I didn't respond. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Let them talk. Let them guess. I was done performing. The second step was restoring the house. It became a project, something to pour myself into. A few weeks off work, not for mental health, though I probably needed that too, but to roll up my sleeves and do something real. I hired a contractor to fix the foundation cracks and water damage. I consulted an interior designer who specialized in historical homes and found an old photo album of Grandma's tucked away in a hallway closet. Every detail, every fixture, every color scheme, I brought it back to life with purpose. Neighbors started noticing. Some remembered her, came by and told stories. One woman, Mrs. Valenti, from across the street, brought over banana bread and said, "Your grandmother would be proud of what you're doing here. She talked about you all the time." And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. 2. The house wasn't just a home anymore. It was a symbol, a quiet declaration that I could build something. That I wasn't the forgotten middle child, the background character. I was the protagonist now, the architect of this chapter. Meanwhile, my lawyer continued digging, and what he uncovered only made their betrayal deeper. Apparently, Grandma had updated her will not once, but twice in her final year. The first change had removed Jenna as a secondary executor. The second, dated just 10 days before her passing, formally cut both my parents out of any control over her estate, naming an independent executor from her church congregation. But that man had died a month before her, and my parents had pounced. On the confusion, they'd never told anyone about the newest version. They submitted the oldest one they could find, forged Grandma's signature on a quitclaim deed, and made sure the estate passed peacefully into their hands. It was fraud, clear as day. Armed with that, my lawyer began preparing something bigger, a civil case, not just to reclaim what had been stolen, but to expose it. to show the court that what they did wasn't a misunderstanding. It was calculated. It was theft disguised as caretaking. But I wasn't just thinking about courtrooms anymore. I was thinking about legacy. So, I created a nonprofit. Started as a simple idea, the Lorraine Foundation. Its mission was to restore and preserve the homes of elderly people who'd passed, especially when they had no one left to protect their wishes. I wanted to help other families keep their histories alive, and I wanted my grandmother's name to mean something again. I put up my own money to launch it. I had savings. I cashed out a few investments. And once the site went live, something unexpected happened. People noticed. A local journalist reached out, intrigued by the mission. She came by the house, took pictures, asked questions. She was polite and professional until she asked, "Do you mind if I ask what inspired this?" I hesitated, then said, "Let's just say it was a gift that was almost lost, and now I'm making sure it never is." The article ran the next week. Grandson honors grandmother's legacy with home restoration project. It was simple, heartfelt, and oddly powerful. Donations trickled in. Emails started arriving. Stories from people who'd been through the same thing. Fights over wills, homes lost, memories erased. I wasn't alone. Jenna emailed me with a subject line that just said, "We need to talk." I didn't open it. 2 days later, Tyler called from an unknown number. I picked up out of curiosity. "No, man, come on. This is getting out of hand, is it?" I said coolly. "You're dragging the family through the mud. Everyone's talking about that article. I didn't name anyone. If people are assuming, maybe that's on them. You're seriously going to sue Mom and Dad after everything?" I almost laughed. After everything? You mean after they stole my inheritance and tried to gaslight me into thinking it never existed? He was quiet. I added, "You all made your choices. Now I'm making mine." I hung up. Something about that moment felt final, like a door closing behind me that I no longer had any interest in walking back through. And just when I thought things had settled, the final piece dropped into place. My lawyer forwarded me an email from a bank in town. Apparently, Grandma had a small trust fund. Nothing massive, just under $40,000, meant to go to the heir of her house for repairs, upkeep, or personal development. It had never been claimed because no one told me it existed because they assumed. I wouldn't look, but I had, and now it was mine. With it, I finished the final phase of the home's restoration. I turned the upstairs bedroom into a community reading room, installing a little plaque by the door, for Lorraine, who listened when no one else did. And people came. Neighbors, old friends of hers, curious visitors who'd read the article. The house became alive again, not just with furniture or wallpaper, but with purpose. And through it all, I remained silent. I didn't confront them. I didn't gloat. I let them stew in the distance, let them try to explain to others why I'd vanished. Why the quiet kid they'd ignored all those years had suddenly become the one thing they couldn't control. But behind the scenes, my lawyer filed the lawsuit quietly, officially. And what we included in that filing would change everything. By the time we filed the civil suit, I wasn't doing it just for myself anymore. Yes, they'd stolen something from me. Yes, they'd lied, manipulated, covered their tracks. But this wasn't just about a house, or even about Grandma's will. It was about the pattern. The system they'd created within our family, where control flowed one way and dissent was treated like betrayal, where silence was expected and questioning. The status quo was met with thin smiles and quiet punishment. And I wasn't going to be silent anymore. My lawyer, James, was brilliant. Sharp without being flashy, methodical without being cold. He understood the stakes immediately. "We're not just proving fraud," he said, sliding the paperwork across his desk to me. "We're showing a long-standing pattern of intentional misrepresentation. This isn't a clerical error, it's a cover-up." The suit outlined 3 main charges: fraudulent concealment of the valid will, unlawful transfer of property through a forged quitclaim deed, and misappropriation of estate assets, including the trust Grandma had set aside for me. We were seeking restitution, damages, and most importantly, a formal judgment invalidating the transfer of the property and restoring my legal rights as the rightful heir. But James had one more idea. A big one. If we want this to stick, and if you want to make a point, they need to be caught doing what they always do, hiding things, pretending, pressuring. I frowned. You want to bait them? Not directly. But if we leak just enough information to certain people, the pressure will do the work for us. People like your cousin Ethan, or that neighbor who still talks to your mom. Let the news of the lawsuit trickle. Give them time to panic. When they panic, they'll make mistakes. It felt risky, but it also felt right. So we did it. We didn't go public. Not yet. No press, no big announcements. Just a quiet ripple sent through familiar waters. A distant cousin received a heads-up email. One of Jenna's old friends got curious and asked questions in the family group chat. The lawyer who'd originally helped Grandma draft her last will, now retired but still in contact with the firm, reached out to confirm he'd be willing to testify. And just like that, the web began to vibrate. 3 days later, Tyler texted me. Bro, I heard about the legal stuff. What are you doing? This is getting ugly. I ignored it. Jenna sent me an email. So this is how you want to handle things? Through lawyers? You couldn't even talk to us like adults. You think you're some victim? Grandma loved all of us. I replied, if that were true, you wouldn't have hidden her last will. Done pretending, Jenna. See you. In court, an hour later, I got a call from a blocked number. It was my dad. I'm only going to say this once, he said, voice low and sharp. Drop this. You have no idea the damage you're doing. No, I said calmly. I think I do. For the first time, I actually understand it. It was a pause. Then he dropped the mask. You think this makes you look noble? It makes you look weak, bitter, petty? Do you really want the whole family to know you're trying to bleed us dry? I'm not trying, I said. I'm succeeding. Then I hung up. The next step was bolstering the case. I reached out to Grandma's church, spoke with a woman named Martha who used to lead the Sunday volunteer crew. She remembered me. She remembered Grandma, and she remembered the conversation where Grandma said she'd updated her will to make sure Noah is the one who gets the house. He's the only one who won't turn it into an Airbnb. Martha agreed to submit a written statement. Then came the accountant. It turns out in the months before her death, Grandma had started keeping financial records more meticulously than ever. Her CPA, an older gentleman named Wallace, was shocked to hear the house had been transferred so quickly after her passing. I remember her being very specific about the will. She wanted everything to go through the proper channels. He provided a copy of an email she'd sent him, dated a week before she passed, summarizing the key points in her estate plan, including the house goes to Noah. I've told the family this. I hope they honor it. But just in case, I've made the legal documents airtight. That line, that final sentence, it made my stomach twist. She knew. She knew they'd try something. I gave the email to James. He added it to the filing. We also subpoenaed the notary, who supposedly witnessed the quitclaim deed. That's when things got interesting. The notary, a woman named Diana, denied ever signing anything related to my grandmother's property. She even provided a log showing she wasn't working on the day the document was allegedly notarized. Forgery, plain and simple. James smiled. When he saw that, this alone could end it. But let's make sure it doesn't just end. Let's make it echo. And so we added one more piece to the puzzle, a formal petition to reopen the probate case, invalidate the fraudulent deed, and transfer legal ownership retroactively to me, along with a request for sanctions. But I wasn't stopping there. I started drafting a public statement not to release yet, but to have ready for when the case went public. It's for when they inevitably tried to spin the story. I wrote about what the house meant to me, about Grandma, about what it's like to be erased by the people who are supposed to love you most, and how I wasn't going to let that happen again. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I made one final move. I listed the Lorraine Foundation's first major initiative, the Davis Grant for Ethical Estate Planning, a $10,000 award for families who commit to transparent, fair estate processes and document their stories for public education. I launched it on the Foundation's website quietly, professionally, but I made sure Jenna saw it. How the digital flyer was posted on a local Facebook group she still followed, with her wedding photo from the newspaper 6 years ago still set as her profile picture. She liked it, then unliked it 5 minutes later. Couldn't help but smile. Because now the chessboard was set. They could lash out. They could smear me. They could try to spin it. But the documents were filed. The evidence was gathered. The narrative was mine now. And they were about to learn what it felt like to play defense for once in their lives. Court dates have a strange way of making time stretch and fold. The day we finally walked into that courtroom, it felt both long overdue and way too soon. I remember sitting there, pressed slacks, clean-cut suit, my lawyer James beside me. Papers meticulously organized in front of us, feeling like I was watching a movie, like none of it was real. And yet this was the most real thing that had ever happened to me. My parents entered together. Jenna followed a few paces behind, her heels too loud against the polished floor. Tyler didn't show. Can't say I was surprised. They avoided my gaze, and I didn't offer one. Let them squirm, let them feel, if only for one day, what it's like to be weighed and measured. The judge was a calm, middle-aged woman with glasses. On the tip of her nose, and zero tolerance for drama, perfect. The case began with procedural formalities. Then opening statements. James went first. He laid it all out, succinct, methodical, undeniable. We will show, Your Honor, that Noah Davis was not only named as the sole beneficiary of his grandmother's property, but that this fact was knowingly concealed by his parents, who instead filed an outdated will and executed a forged quitclaim deed to transfer the house into their possession. This is not a misunderstanding. It is deliberate fraud. I could feel the air shift in the room. Then their lawyer, a man I recognized from a cheesy local commercial years ago, stood and tried to downplay everything. There was no malice. Here, only confusion. The family did their best during a very difficult time. James let him talk. Then we began to present our case. The will, the trust, the email from Grandma's accountant. The notarization log that proved the deed was forged. Testimony from the church friend Martha, who recounted the exact conversation about Grandma's intent to leave me the home. The CPA, who walked the court through the email in his inbox. Sent just days before her passing. Then came the bombshell. The subpoenaed notary, Diana, under oath, clearly stating she did not witness or sign the deed they'd submitted. James turned to the judge. Your Honor, we're not just talking about deception. We're talking about a coordinated effort to erase my client's legal rights and take what was rightfully his, a house he now owns only because he repurchased it on the open market after it was stolen. My mother looked like she'd aged. 10 years in that courtroom, her hair pulled too tight, her lipstick cracking slightly at the edges. She wouldn't look at me. My dad sat with his arms crossed, jaw tight, as if he could glare the truth away. Jenna just kept blinking like her contacts were suddenly betraying her too. They tried to argue it was an oversight, that they didn't understand the legalities, that they were just doing what they thought Grandma would have wanted. That's when James stood up and asked permission to submit a copy of the handwritten letter found in Grandma's journal, letter addressed to me. It read in part, Noah, if you're reading this, I hope everything went the way I planned. But if it didn't, if they tried to take this from you, remember, the world doesn't give power. You take it back, quietly, calmly, like a Davis. You could hear a pin drop after that. The judge called a recess. When we returned, she didn't waste time. She ruled in our favor on all counts. The will was reinstated. The original deed was declared fraudulent. The sale to my shell company was deemed valid, but restitution was awarded in the full amount of market value plus damages. My parents were ordered to pay a sizable sum back to the estate. Forging legal documents apparently doesn't sit well with a judge. And in a rare, beautiful twist of irony, the trust fund Grandma had set up for repairs and restoration wasn't just protected, it was increased. The court awarded additional compensation to the Lorraine Foundation as part of the judgment, citing ethical preservation and restitution of legacy. That was the moment it became real. Lost not just the house, not just the money, they lost the narrative, the control, and the part that stung them most. I never raised my voice, never humiliated them in public. I let the facts do what their excuses never could, stand. As court adjourned, I packed my papers slowly. My parents didn't approach. Jenna gave me one long look, a cocktail of anger and disbelief behind her eyes, and then they walked out silent. I stayed a few minutes longer, just sitting there, taking it in. James clapped me on the shoulder. "Hell of a statement, Noah." I nodded. She made it easy. All I had to do was follow the map she left behind. That night, I returned to the house they said I wasn't meant to have. I walked through every room again, touched the railing she used to grip, stood on the porch she once rocked on for hours with a glass of lemonade and a crossword. And then, as the sun set, I turned on the porch light and unlocked the front door. Not for them, not for reconciliation, but for the community. Because her home, my home, was now more than a place. It was a quiet monument to the truth. In the weeks that followed the verdict, the fallout hit my family like a slow-motion train wreck. Painful, inevitable, and completely self-inflicted. Word spread quickly. It was the local article. The journalist wrote an updated follow-up, titled, "Grandmother's Last Wish, A Legal Battle for Legacy." Or maybe it was the family itself, spinning damage control like a broken record. Either way, the truth had left the courtroom and entered living rooms, church pews, and weekend brunch tables across town. Extended relatives began to reach out, not with sympathy, but with distance. Cousin Ethan called me and said, "I always figured something was weird with how fast they sold the place. I'm sorry, man. I wish I'd asked more questions." Aunt Carol messaged me a long-winded apology, mostly trying to shift blame to my parents. "You know how your mother gets when she's stressed." But I didn't reply. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was watching the web they'd built, unravel thread by thread. My mother was forced to resign from the community council she'd proudly chaired for years. Apparently, members were uncomfortable being associated with someone under public record for estate fraud. Jenna's luxury wedding planning business took a hit. One of her clients pulled out after reading the article, and another requested a refund. She posted a vague Instagram story about cancel culture and family betrayal, but it only stirred more questions. Her follower count dropped, so did her credibility. My father kept a low profile, but I heard from a reliable source. One of his old golfing buddies, that a local investor backed out of a property deal with him. Didn't like the idea of working with someone who forges signatures. The guy reportedly said, and Tyler, he finally reached out with a text that just said, "I didn't know everything, but I should have. I'm sorry." I thought about replying. I didn't. Because by now it wasn't about whether they said sorry. It was about what they'd done when they thought I couldn't fight back. I didn't need revenge in the form of screaming matches or public shaming. That wasn't my style. I'd already won where it mattered, quietly, with dignity and a steady hand, just like Grandma would have wanted. The Lorraine Foundation continued to grow. We partnered with a law firm offering free estate planning clinics for the elderly. A few months later, a small nonprofit in another state reached out and asked to replicate the model. I said yes. I even visited their first restored property, a little blue house with chipped paint and a rose garden out back, and helped plant a new tree in the yard. Back home, the house was thriving. The community room hosted monthly book clubs and memory-sharing nights. Locals stopped by to drop off letters, flowers, sometimes old photos of my grandmother from neighborhood events. Her legacy was no longer trapped in the past. It was living. And me. I finally felt free. Not just from their lies, but from the weight of being the invisible child, the family scapegoat, the one they underestimated for far too long. On the 1-year anniversary of the verdict, I hosted a small gathering on the porch. Just a few close friends, some of the volunteers from the foundation, and a quiet playlist of Frank Sinatra humming through an old record player I'd found in the attic. As the sun dipped below the maple trees, I sat on the same wicker chair Grandma once claimed as her throne and looked out across the street. A familiar car passed by slowly. My father behind the wheel, my mother in the passenger seat. They didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't even turn their heads. I just watched them go, peaceful and unmoved. Then I stood up, walked to the front steps, and flipped the porch light on. Let them drive into the dark. This house stays lit.